going to kick it off with the intros of the alumni, and then I'll ask the first question. And then after that, students, the floor is yours. Okay, so Colin, if you don't mind starting, just to do a quick intro.
Yeah, happily. Hi, everyone. I'm Colin Zascott, class of 2012, which means that my tenure is coming up, which is a bit daunting for me. But I have my PhD in social psychology from the University of Arizona. I'm currently an associate professor of psychology up in Duluth at the College of St. Scholastica, where I study implicit social cognition and health disparities. I'll kind of quickly note too that in 2 weeks, I'm actually transitioning to the industry where I'll be a user experience researcher at State Farm, essentially examining how the user experience on submitting claims and using the app can just be better. So yeah, I can speak a little bit to the academic side, because I still have my feet in that world, and then also to the industry side too, if folks are interested in that. So cool. Thanks for letting me be here for the next hour.
All right, Claire, would you like to...
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know if I should punt it to someone. Okay.
Yeah, you can punt it.
Okay, Claire.
Hey. Yeah, Colin and I had some overlap. I graduated in 2011, and I have an undergraduate degree in geography and international studies with a concentration in community and global health. And straight from Macalester, I went to get my PhD in geography at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I subsequently held several postdoc positions in geography and public health and in education. And I was teaching, so I have a lot of experience kind of on the academic side of things, and then transitioned out of academia. I have been working for the past 14 months as a senior evaluator, working with public health coalitions across the country to assess the impacts of their public health interventions, particularly in areas of substance use and mental health. And in 2 weeks, I will actually also be transitioning to a new position. So lots of movement going on. I will be the director of planning for Charlotte-Mecklenburg School System, which is the 17th largest school district in the country.
Well, I'm the only one left, so I'll go. I'm Beth Mulligan. I am class of 99 at Macalester, so it's coming up on too many years now. But I had a major in psychology with a minor in philosophy and cognitive science at Macalester, and then I went to get my PhD in cognitive psych right after at the University of Colorado Boulder. And then when I got out of graduate school, I took a job in the private sector doing consulting work. I am at a firm that does market research, evaluation, and strategic planning, and I have been there for 15 years. We work on all kinds of projects. Our clients are all mostly local government, state government, and nonprofits. So we do a lot of helping people figure out if their programs are working, helping people understand if their education and public health messaging campaigns are working, trying to do community needs assessments for people. I do cost of living studies. I do a huge array of things. I am generally on our quantitative team. We have kind of a qualitative team and a quantitative team. Internally, I do a little bit of both. I do some mixed method stuff, but I am primarily a quantitative person. But yeah, that's my general background.
Great, thank you. I'll put the question in the chat so you all have access to it there too, but then I'll say it too. So I would love to hear, how did you decide that this was the area or industry or discipline that you were interested in pursuing? And maybe the decision wasn't made by you, but maybe you just found yourself there. But I'd love to hear a little bit about that journey. And then students, feel free to pipe in too if you've got other questions.
I can start since I kicked off our introduction. I think for me, much of how I grew up, everyone told me that I should work with people, and so I was like, I didn't know what that was outside of psychology. So I think my path at least at Macalester was pretty cut and dry. I was a psych major from day one and never left the major, which I think is perhaps a fairly unique experience for some people. But for me, it really came down to but my worldview by which I see things, which is an understanding of that people have a lot of their own individual differences and cultures that they bring into scenarios, and that the context that we are in also has a major impact on our behavior. And I wanted just to explore the science of that process. And for me, that was psychology. So that's been the major draw for me, is just that I can actually use complex theory to understand people. I've used that in teaching, and then kind of transitioning to industry too. Looking for work that just has impact, whether it's in the health disparities work that I do, or kind of now in the kind of usability of different products that would, decisions that my team and I will be making impact millions of people. If you use an app that we have, like that will directly impact you. So for me, it's having an impact, while also kind of keeping a really broad understanding of people, not just a really narrowed focus on maybe one perspective, but being open to a lot of different types of areas, which I think social psychology has really lended itself to. I talk to public health people, I talk to people in behavioral economics, I talk to anthropologists, sociologists. I get to have really great conversations with a lot of different people, and I really value that.
I would say for me, it's a little bit of me driving it and just being open to different opportunities along the way. When you look at the topics that I've worked on, they're a little bit all over the place. I've worked on a lot of research and interventions around public health and health disparities, but then I've also done work on civic engagement and labor markets and transportation and housing affordability. But the overarching kind of framework, it relates to health and social equity. So really trying to do work that creates more equitable society, and being open to collaborations along the way of people who have those similar interests, and jumping on board with that. And I am really passionate about immigration. From both a professional and a personal experience, I wanted to work more in immigration, and it was really hard to get my foot in the door, to be honest. And then I also have my own experience as an immigrant. So I was an international student at Mac, and transitioned through F1 visa, J1, H1B, and now finally a green card. And so I just wanted to also mention that, because if you are someone with a non-US citizenship, then I'm happy to talk more about that and how you use that in the job market.
I think one of the things that all of us kind of have in common is this, it's sort of the breadth of the liberal arts education that I think, shows up in a lot of our career paths. I definitely left Mac, probably came to Mac with a desire to sort of do something that made a difference. But I like a lot of things, and I think big problems are hairy problems that kind of require a lot of, it requires a lot of breadth of knowledge and understanding and collaboration to solve. And so I think my interest, I came to Mac as a chemistry major. That lasted a couple of years. And then my first year course was psychology. I'd never really thought about psychology before, but I thought, yes, chemistry, so much of what I was going to do was going to be this very fine-grained things. Like, so much of it felt like it was already figured out, where psychology just felt like there was so much left to learn. Like, we didn't know anything in the field, just had a lot of potential. And so I got really excited about psychology, and I worked as a preceptor for a couple of classes. I had had a research, I'm forgetting what my titles were at the time, but I worked as a research assistant for a couple of different professors in the psych department while I was there. And I got really excited about cognitive. I love how people make decisions and how our minds work, and how we think and how we learn things from what we read and all of those things. And so I got really excited about that and decided I'd go to grad school. And if you go to grad school in the sciences, which psychology counts, like most of the time you're going on a paid research assistantship. So it's like a job. I mean, it's a poorly paid job, but it's a job. I didn't pay to go to graduate school. I got paid to go to graduate school, and that made a huge difference for me. I mean, I was a really middle-class kid from Iowa growing up. And so getting to go to school, but have it paid for, was huge. And so that was kind of how I ended up in grad school. And then, I was kind of in a segment of psychology that bumped into a lot of other areas. I was studying judgment decision-making, which is kind of a half cognitive, half social psych. My advisor actually left to go to the business school at the University of Chicago while I was there, because there's a lot of economics, behavioral economics people who are doing that work. And so it was already a fairly interdisciplinary field. And then we had you could get a graduate certificate in cognitive science, which kind of meant then you were taking more philosophy classes and linguistics classes and computer science classes in addition to the psychology that I was doing. I did another certificate in science and technology policy while I was in grad school, which got me into kind of a whole other set of fields, because a lot of those people were coming out of like climate science and journalism and, just a variety of fields. And I felt like that the kind of more that I branched out, the more I understood how these things were all connected and how kind of people approach different problems from a bunch of different angles. And so then when I was getting out, there was kind of a combination of personal and professional reasons. I was looking to postdoc, but I had a partner who was still in grad school, and I was looking to stay in the area for a while. And so I took a job at a consulting firm, and it was a job I didn't know existed before I had it, and I loved it, and I've never left. So, it was definitely sort of a, lucky accident situation.
All right, thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to the students. What questions do you have for the for the panelists?
I have a question, yes.
Yep, go ahead.
My name is Mahmoud. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm an international student from Morocco. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the experience of international students because I'm in the process of looking for internships and trying to break into the research industry. I'm mainly interested in economics and political science, mainly development economics. And I'm trying to reach out to different think tanks, because that's really the epitome of what I want to do, just research as kind of an occupation. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to that, just more in general, and maybe if you could speak to the international student experience, how you could efficiently market that to employers, how you could navigate also the fact that some of these internships aren't offered to international students, etc. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. If you want to hear my full experience going through the job search for 10 years or something like that as an international person, we might need a couple more hours. But, really what it comes down to is apply for OPT, right? You're getting ready to graduate, get your OPT. Regardless, it doesn't matter if you have a job lined up yet, get your OPT. You want to be prepared. So when you're on the job market as an OPT, you're a free agent. As long as you're working in your field, which is fairly broad, right? You will be able to work for any employer. That's the way you get your foot in the door. If you like that employer, you want to stay, you really want to try to have that conversation early on with them to see if they can get you a J1 or H1B. If they cannot do that, I would consider grad school, because then you can get back on your F1. If you are on your F1, you will also be eligible for another OPT. So by that time, you're quite a few years down the road. And then it also it does depend a lot on your field. It typically is easier to get different visa statuses when you are working in non-corporate sectors, so in nonprofit and in academia. And for organizations that are used to working with international people, for organizations who have never ever had someone who's not a US citizen, it's going to be hard for them. You might offer to, pay for immigration lawyer, but it's going to be a little bit harder for them to navigate that. And for corporate, it is also harder to get H-1Bs because it's a one-time lottery thing, once a year lottery thing. So, yeah, in short, first thing you do when you see an opportunity, check to see if there's a citizenship requirement, because a lot of times there is, like you said, a lot of jobs, they will not hire someone if sponsorship is required. It sucks, but it's the way it is. So you just got to move on to the next one and keep knocking on doors until you find someone who is going to be willing to go through that for you. And like I said, use the OPT to get your foot in the door.
I really can't speak to anything outside of Claire's expertise. I thought that was well covered. I'm genuinely interested in taking notes for that, just for my own students that I work with too, who are having these same questions up at Scholastica. So I will be passing along information like that. Thank you, Claire.
Yes, always you feel free to reach out with additional information regarding navigating the job market with, without a US citizenship.
Can I ask how early on were you able to get at least an internship or for your first professional exposure as an undergrad? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing internships every summer I was working, and then internships as well in the Twin Cities. I think my junior and my senior year. So I definitely highly recommend that. I think my internship at the time was set up as an independent study. And so that's the way that I was able to do it, and also, I guess, get credit for it and maintain my other job that I had on campus. So yeah, any opportunity to do internship, obviously take that. If you don't have space for it during the semester, then during either J term or during the summer.
The summer opportunities for research at Mac too are worth exploring. I know going into my senior year, I had a research fellowship that where I just conducted research on campus with one of my psych professors, and that, I mean, it was $5,000. Like, it was a nice generous summer stipend, and I got to conduct my own research, which was really great for kind of working on trying to get my foot in the door with jobs and also grad school kind of senior year. And it turned into a published paper. Like, we actually did stuff with the research. So if getting out into the broader community, especially, who knows what COVID looks like in the summer in terms of opportunities, looking internally at Mac too, with the funding opportunities for research projects, especially within the social sciences, there's money there. And at least when I was a student, not many people applied. I'm hoping that has changed. But that's also worth a look too.
I mean, I think too, I don't know honestly how this matters if you're an international student or not, but the job market right now is really, really good for job seekers. I mean, I think that's maybe why the other panelists even are looking into private sector jobs. It has been very hard to hire as someone who has been trying to get employees at the place where I work. And I think having research skills right now, firms even who would have been looking for someone with a PhD or a master's degree are accepting bachelor's level people who can do the work. And I think it's a huge opportunity time, if you want to kind of go straight into private sector work in research. There's a lot of jobs and people are fighting over new employees. So I think it's a great time to be putting yourself out there for things, even if you think maybe I don't quite meet the qualifications, or on paper, I'm not whatever. I think if you can make a case for yourself, there's a real need for people with research skills right now in the workplace. And so it's a good time to be looking for work.
Yeah, COVID has really turned the labor market upside down. I mean, we went from a market where, you were lucky if you got an interview, and I guess you still are, definitely are, but it's way more driven now by the people who are seeking work, and we are in a better position to ask for certain things that we weren't able to ask, or and that's really going to work in your advantage, because some of us have not been in that kind of job market. So and also with virtual, like a lot of jobs have become remote, and that is again like something that we've never really seen before. So that means that you can work remotely for a company and live somewhere else, and that really like opens up your opportunities.
My new job is technically out of Atlanta, and I have to be there once a month. So we're just going to move to Minneapolis. So yeah, the remote possibilities have really opened the door for a lot of things. And I think even with kind of speaking to Beth's point of using just your undergrad experience as a way to kind of like sell and make a case for yourself, a lot of this like the skills that you get at a place like Mac, critical thinking, working with interdisciplinary teams, your ability to just think logically about issues. I assume that you've been exposed to a lot of different content areas, like a lot of those types of skills. You have a wonderful chance of being able to kind of make a case for yourself with all of those things. So I know, with this new job that I'm going to be starting, I'm very heavily quantitatively based, but there's going to be a lot of more qualitative type work that I'll need to do that honestly I haven't done before. But when they look at my body of work and how I was able to kind of frame my own abilities, they're like, well, we can teach you those things. What we can't teach is, are you comfortable talking to other people? Can you look at previous research and generate research questions? Can you anticipate what we need to look at for future research directions? All of these things that have been reinforced in a lot of your classes are the skills that are going to translate really well. They can teach you how to run a correlation if you've never done that before. They can teach you how to run a usability test if you've never interacted with a client using a new product before. They can teach you those things. What they can't teach you are a lot of those softer skills that really get developed at Mac. So yeah, I think you have a wonderful opportunity.
All right, other questions?
You can also put them in the chat if you don't
Yes.
want to ask us.
While we wait, I will put one in the chat. And it's just a little bit broader of a question, but what do you wish more people were thinking about in relation to the work that you do? Or even, I know a couple of you are changing positions too. Just curious to hear what your thoughts are on those. And if we could hear from everybody, because I'm assuming you're going to give very different perspective.
I mean, as someone that right after Mac went into a PhD program, and I knew that was right for me, and I wanted to go the academia route. One of the things that for those that are interested in going that route potentially is that you may not get a lot of perspectives about industry related jobs or working in the private sector. Oftentimes, to no fault of their own, but a lot of the advisors that you might face in grad school want you to have their experience, which is being an academic. And so I think that's something that I struggled with. That's something that I always wanted to do, but just with COVID and some shifting life priorities, location became more important for me. So being able to be back in Minneapolis, back home, In academia, you usually don't get many options in where you live. It's kind of where the jobs are. I think of it much like being a professional athlete. Without the perks of being a professional athlete, you kind of get drafted to where you're going to go. But so for me, I guess I wish I would have I would have had more connections to people that that had been in industry positions, just so that I could get kind of a taste of what that's like. Being engaged in a panel like this, I think, is a really good start with 3 people that have kind of gone through that experience. But kind of just broadly speaking to the academic experience, it may be very biased in some of the direction if you go if you're thinking about a PhD program and what they're training you for. So asking questions ahead of time about programs and what they're training you for. I think a lot of programs have switched to thinking more about preparing you for jobs outside of academia, just because that's probably one of the job markets that that hasn't improved, is the academic job market. It's very funneled, a lot of PhDs, not a lot of jobs. So that would just be one thing that I would potentially consider and wish I had more information about with my own field.
Yeah, I definitely 100% agree with what Colin was saying, you know, and I'm sure Beth can relate. When you go into a PhD program, which I recommend, maybe not to everyone, but generally I had a positive experience, you will get funneled into academia. And like we are showing, there are many other jobs outside of academia. You know, I think going to grad school, getting your master's degree is also a fantastic idea. It really helps you just continue to learn, develop your skill sets, deepen your knowledge. You can do great things with undergrad. And I know plenty of people who have flourishing careers and did not go to grad school. So don't feel like you have to, but if you can, and you can get the financial support and you have the opportunity to do it, you know, I think it's also kind of a gift to yourself. Real world problems are also interdisciplinary. And so I would say maybe don't get as caught up in your major or in your discipline, because I don't know, I did a geography PhD, and if I looked for jobs for geographers, I might not have found what I found, you know, so it's not like jobs for psychologists or jobs for sociologists. You're kind of limiting yourself if you're only thinking about that. Think about what you're passionate about. What are some real world issues that you want to work on, right? Do you want to work on, you know, reducing poverty? Do you want to work on, you know, affordable housing? And kind of like look more towards jobs where you're able to do that. And also look at skills, like what kind of skills do you bring? Do you bring research skills? Okay, great. That's a good starting point. What jobs will allow you to use those skills or further develop those skills? And then lastly, what I did want to also mention is what is now termed as diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big push on the labor market right now. So I say, approach it with caution, but you can use this to your advantage because you bring diverse identities. You come from a college that is promoting a lot of this diversity and multiculturalism and internationalism, right? So you might already be accustomed to having some of these conversations. And there's a lot of jobs right now that are kind of in that category in different sectors. If that's an area where you have interest, I would say look into those types of jobs.
That is 100% a top issue. We spent the last year at our firm doing DEI initiatives and figuring out, you know, how does that, you know, how does our work better move forward diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how does our company better do this? And yeah, I've also seen, I mean, as at a consulting firm, you know, we're seeing RFPs all the time. That is what other people are looking to hire research for, and wanting DEI needs assessments has become a huge thing. Wanting like DEI strategic planning, wanting, you know, wanting kind of consulting work in that space from other people has become a huge thing that didn't exist 2 years ago. Basically, it's all there now. And I think, yeah, I don't know, that just sends me on another train of thought, which is probably tangential. But I think one of the fun things about having been in the consulting world now for a while is that I get a sense of what the world thinks the problems are, because this is what people are paying for. These are problems that people are paying to be solved by others who can, provide research skills to help, give data and things that'll contribute to these solutions. And when I started working, for example, there was a ton of money from all the tobacco industry settlements, and there was a lot of public health work in the smoking cessation space, and trying to do work on that. And then that sort of went away. And now, I'm in Colorado. And so now there's a ton of marijuana industry money, and there's a lot of work around like marijuana safety and vaping safety for youth and, things of that nature. And there has all of a sudden been, the need has been around for a while, but there is now sort of a lot of work being done in mental health needs assessments for communities, and how do you improve mental health outcomes. And, that's become more of like a federal initiative. And so there's dollars behind it. So money is always slowing down from federal priorities a lot of times into states, and then state priorities into nonprofits locally. And so, you sort of follow the money on these things, and you see what problems there is money to be solved. And then sometimes you solve other problems on the side, but you kind of do that with money you've gotten from other places. I think, the economics of the private sector are pretty interesting, and where the money comes from. But yeah, I think to points that others were making, at my company alone, there's only about a dozen of us, but there are people who have terminal bachelor's degrees. There's a few people with master's degrees. There's a few people with PhDs. We're all from different fields. We've got psychologists and economists and political scientists and anthropologists and business people and marketing people. And so I think the common thread is more that it's a group of people who are kind of good critical thinkers, and they're curious, and they're interested in problem solving, and they're conscientious and want to solve problems that matter. And you can have a lot of different backgrounds to do that. And I think, certainly I could do my job without the PhD. Having it, I enjoyed getting it. I would probably do it again. But I certainly wouldn't have had to do it. I could have gotten this job. I just didn't know that. I didn't know this job existed. I didn't even know to look for it. And I think, that's my biggest thing that I think about if I were to go back and talk to my past self. I just didn't know some of these things existed, and I vastly underweighted the value of a Macalester education. And I think I could have done a lot more straight out of college than I thought I could. I sort of saw myself as like, oh, you just have a college degree, that's it, And I really think like that it should go a lot farther. It could go a lot farther. I think you have a lot of skills around, like Claire was saying, soft skills around communication and critical thinking and problem solving and empathy, and being able to talk to people who are different than you. These are all really important skills in the workplace, and a lot of other things can be taught. So yeah, I think especially now, given the job market, if there's anything at all you're interested in doing, you just go for it and you see, put in an application. You don't get it, but like, try it out. My grad school advisor even used to tell me, he was like, I just applied for all the jobs I thought were interesting while I was in grad school, because grad school is kind of a slog. It's a long period of time. You're kind of stuck doing this one thing, and it gets, there's going to be low points in anything you're doing, but there are low points in graduate school. And my advisor basically told me when he was in grad school, he just applied for anything that seemed interesting. And then, either he didn't get it and he didn't have an option, or he did. And if he kept choosing graduate school, he felt like he was choosing it over these other things. So he had applied to be a staff writer at the New York Times. And, he had done all these things during graduate school, but like consistently, stayed with the career, but did it feeling like it was a choice he was making, and not just like, something you sort of have to keep doing. So I think in general, like, you can always just apply for other stuff and see what your options are. And then, you can always turn down a job if you get it and don't want it, but that's sort of the worst case scenario. So, and that's not very bad. So go for it.
I just want to piggyback on that real quick about just sometimes making a choice, because sometimes you build it up. I was talking to someone else who's about to graduate undergrad. And sometimes you build it up so much in your head, right? You need to make a decision. What are you going to do? You know, make the right decision. It really doesn't matter. Just do something. Just do something, really, you know, do something. If you don't like it, the worst thing that can happen is, you know, again, you don't like it and then you choose a different path. You're not stuck to it.
And I think you can utilize a lot of the tech resources that are out there for a lot of these things too. Like my entire job search was all on LinkedIn. That is the only place that I looked at for applying to jobs. So if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, that you should make one. That's a great place to make connections to people too. Like alum like us would happy to connect on LinkedIn, right? Because the recommendation side of the world can be really beneficial. And I know Facebook can be problematic and dated and among a number of things, but there are also really great groups on there that talk about all the different possibilities. So I'm a part of a couple of different Facebook groups that just involve like social science PhDs to industry and things like that. And so jobs I'd never even thought of before, people are talking about their experience with it. So there's a lot of different ways to utilize some of those platforms to kind of open your mind versus just sitting, you know, and being like, what do I Google next? You know, jobs for psychology majors. You can actually get a little more digging into the resources out there by joining some of those groups that are available. I've found that to be a wonderful resource because then you get I had people look at how do I translate my CV to a one-page resume? Because I had, you know, a 10-page CV. It's like, no one cares about listing your publications, right? Like move on to the next thing. So there's a lot of great resources out there with other people that want to make connections like that. So I would encourage you to expand your network too.
And Macalester has a LinkedIn group, and I think, you know, this is maybe just projecting, but I think I was very nervous about, you know, reaching out, and LinkedIn didn't exist when I graduated either, but I would have been terrified to reach out to alumni, even if it did. And I know that about myself. But I think, you know, now that I'm kind of on the other side of it, like, it's not like Mac kids are reaching out to you every day. If you find somebody on LinkedIn who's a Mac grad, who's doing something that you think is cool, and you send them a message, like, I bet like 9 out of 10 people will write you back because they're excited to be like, oh, it's a Mac grad, that's great. And so, you know, definitely don't feel like you're burdening people or that it's going to be weird. I think more often than not, I mean, Mac grads are kind of a type, and you want to feel helpful and you want to feel like you're useful to others. And so if you have a question that you think somebody might be able to ask it, because most people are more flattered to be asked than put off. And I think that's a lesson I didn't really appreciate as a younger person.
I was going to say, I work with students a lot, and they often feel like they don't have anything to offer in those conversations we're networking. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, if somebody does reach out as a current student or a recent graduate, do they have to feel like they have something to give back to you? Or like, just, I'd love to hear a little bit more about from your perspective as now, you know, you're a few years out. Yeah.
No, not at all. You can tell we just like to talk about ourselves and what we're doing. So if someone reaches out to us, we're always excited. Like Beth was saying, like, hey, we have the Macalester connection, which is strong. Even when people are not from Macalester, I'll still talk to them, but especially from Macalester, you know, like you're just excited to speak with someone. And we make time for that. At least most people will. And you know, they don't, that's fine too. You move on to the next person, but don't feel like you have to bring something. Just bring questions, bring enthusiasm, bring passion. Don't feel like you have to offer something in return.
Yeah, you can just tell us like how crappy the winter has been. I mean, for those of us who've moved away, I think a good story about the 70 below days is always fun. But agreed, like, I think the longer you've been in the work world, the more kind of willing and interested you are in just talking about what you've been doing. So I think you don't have to worry about carrying the conversation. Most people will carry it for you.
And one of the things that whether it's with like other folks that have kind of like cold messaged me, or even like students that I work with now, anytime that we're meeting to talk about things related to grad school or career things, really my big ask is just coming with, what have you done so far, right? So like knowing what you've thought about, being willing to share what you're thinking about. I think sometimes people maybe are like a little embarrassed. They're like, well, I'm a psych major, but I really want to do nursing, and that might mean getting a post back in nursing. It's like, cool, like let's have that conversation. So being open and willing to share what your interests are, and really taking it from like a there are no dumb questions type approach, because at the end of the day, this conversation that I would have is for you, right? It's not for me. So that would be one suggestion that I would have, that I would ask you to bring to the table, is just kind of being open about the conversation, and maybe some of your weaknesses too, right? If your weakness is in statistical analysis, cool. Let's talk about options to maybe how we can bolster that a little bit, because that actually might benefit the direction that you're thinking about going. Or it might tell you that that's not a direction that you should go to. So it's helpful just to have a grasp of what your weaknesses might be too for these conversations, as they get maybe past like just a first initial conversation. If you're actually looking for mentorship, I think that can be a helpful tool.
I saw the question about making, what mistakes can a person make during networking? And I think the bigger mistake is probably not networking. I mean, and I say this as a person who's pretty introverted and I don't love it. And I sort of just, the word itself just makes me, have like a panic attack at some level. But I think once I started thinking about it more as like, oh, like we're all in the work world, and everybody's like, this is what we're spending most of our lives doing, and it's better if you're doing that with your friends. And so I just treat everybody that I interact with as if they're just a personal friend of mine already, and I sort of just come in as if that's my assumption, like, oh, we're great, we're old friends, like cool. And 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 I think when you approach conversations like that, you're more natural, you're more comfortable, you are more yourself, you're more likely to kind of just think out loud, which I think is always an asset if you're a thinky kind of person. I mean, I think, even like in the job hunt, I love seeing candidates who will talk, who will sort of think out loud. I think seeing how somebody's mind works is a really valuable thing. Like, I think you can make a lot of inferences about somebody from seeing how they just kind of talk through something where they're not even sure what they're talking about. And so, I don't think there's a lot of fails in saying the wrong thing. I think the fails are in just not saying enough, or not, not kind of attempting to connect with other people. And to me, like it lowers the bar a lot to sort of treat it like I'm not in a conversation trying to sell someone something. Like there's nothing, I'm just like, we're going to have to do work together. It's better if we are kind of open to the extent that we can be professionally open, and and treat it like we're friends. I just think that makes sort of everything go easier and smoother, and it makes everybody's work life happier, and that's a win, like across the board, I think.
Yeah, I guess the only thing to keep in mind if you are reaching out for someone's time is, like being respectful of their time. Not that you wouldn't be that, but if you say, for instance, like the only time I'm going to be available is like this Friday from 9 to 10 p.m. That's not necessarily going to work with everyone's schedule, right? Like I understand you as a student are very busy, but the professional that you're reaching out to is also busy, and they have maybe children or other responsibilities and lives going on. So just kind of try to be mindful of that as well. And when possible, maybe work around their schedule.
One other thing that I'll just quickly add is, if like I would do your research on whomever it is that you're reaching out to. This is just my own personal preference, that just stems from kind of an equity perspective. Women PhDs are less likely to be referred to as Dr. so and so. My default would be just to find the title of whomever it is you're reaching out to. And if it is, Dr. Mulligan, I would introduce myself referring to that person as Dr. Mulligan. And then once they, in turn send back a message, sign Beth or something, now maybe I would do that. At Mac, I think we can be a little more, like more collegial with one another with that. But when you're kind of cold introducing yourself to someone, titles can be important. And white men oftentimes benefit from kind of being called Dr. So-and-so. So I would extend that respect out to anyone that you're reaching out to, just as a policy, until they kind of give you a preferred name that they use.
We do have a question on the chat too. Can you all see that question? Okay, I'll let you read it and then respond.
Honestly, I don't think I'd redo anything, but I do wish, and part of the reason that I do, like when I get the ask from Mac to be on a panel like this, that I say yes, is that I wish there had been more kind of career panel stuff when I was in school, because I just had no idea that the job I have now existed. And I think, like Colin was saying, our professors for the most part had always been professors and never been anything but professors. And so it's not so much that they just don't know, like they don't always know, like they haven't been on the outside. And so, and I think sometimes that kind of comes off as a belief that the only thing worth doing is to be in academia. I think that is kind of a strong thing that you will get when you're in academia, is this sense that, like, if you don't stay in, that you have failed. And I just know, if you go that route, like, it's okay. It's not a fail. Like, many of us who've gotten out like it better on the outside, but that while you're in, even if you go in intending to leave, sometimes you can't say that. You have to sort of toe the line while you're in graduate school and sort of say the right things, that no, you want to be faculty at an R1. That is the only thing anyone should ever want to do. But I think, I think being outside of academia is really great, but I don't think inside of it, there's a lot of awareness of what that outside is. And that would have been great. I don't think I would have, I wouldn't not do academia. Like, it was, it was great to get a PhD. I loved kind of the opportunity to think about what I wanted for almost a decade of my life, after undergrad. But for sure, I think anything you can do to try to get a sense of the outside world and what the options are is good. And I wish I had had a better sense of that while I was going through the process, I think.
One of the, I guess one of just the skills that I wish I would have had earlier in grad school is not being afraid to, like, seek help. I think grad school and really any sort of profession can sometimes feel isolating. And there was probably times that I wasted a week of work, whereas if I just would have asked, the investigator at the lab I was working with about a simple thing that maybe I was a little too embarrassed to ask about. So I think your ability to ask questions and not be afraid to seek help actually shows really good skills and abilities to be, like, conscientious and a team player. So I wish I wouldn't have kind of done the fake it till you make it type approach oftentimes. And I wish I would have maybe reached out for help when I needed it, just in some practical ways. So you're going to feel like an imposter almost in anything that you do. I think we all probably feel that in many different ways. But seeking out help outside of just, the people that you work with, but maybe some of the higher up people that you might be afraid to reach out to. I think learning that tool can be quite adaptive for you, and it doesn't show weakness, it shows initiative. So reframing that, I think, can be helpful.
So in my grad school and career, I focused mostly on qualitative research and participatory research. And I love it. It's what I chose to do. It's what fits me. In terms of job opportunities, I would say quantitative is going to make you more marketable. Not saying you should do it if you don't like it, but the fact of the matter is more jobs will want you to work with big data, to know how to use R and SAS and Stata and those kind of programs, right? I know how to use SPSS, you know. I can do quants, but it's not my expertise. If you know how to use, to code Python or make maps, ArcGIS, these kind of things, those are really skills that people are asking for. So if you can get proficient in any of those programs, I would say I would recommend that.
Yeah, I agree with Claire. But I do also think there's a ton of work now for qualitative, especially in the UX space that Colin's joining. But there is actually a lot of qual work on that side, and there's a lot of interest in journey maps and empathy maps and these kind of ways of thinking about a human and how to sort of, conceptualize like a person's experience in a place or with a tool or whatever. And a lot of that is a much more qualitative role and way of looking at the data. So, I mean, it's 100% true that if you can code in Python and write R, like you're going to be an amazing job candidate, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to only have those skills. There's definitely a lot of other qualitative skills that people really want. If you're a good interviewer and you're good at talking to other people and you can think about like how to elicit, conversation from people and how to get them to be honest with you and to tell you things. Those are all really valuable skills too.
Yeah, if you want to work with people and collect data with human subjects, empathy is really one of the key facets of getting people to be willing to even enroll in your study in the first place, down to kind of trusting you with potentially confidential data that will be anonymous and things like that. But your ability to build empathetic skills only serves you as a researcher. That's one of those soft skills that I think Macalester really harnesses, that you can translate into a lot of the actual like day-to-day life as a researcher.
I also just wanted to add on to what Colin said earlier too, that I really think the asking questions is a huge thing. We have a lot of, newer staff who come in, and I know now I'm just like the old lady who's been here forever. And I have a hard time seeing myself as that, because I still think I just got out of college. And I think knowing that is important for you. Know that the people who are really old don't know they're really old, and that can be an asset. But I think it's really great, like when people come and they tell me, okay, I don't know how to do this, but here are the like 6 things I tried, or here's where I'm stuck, or here's where this failed to make sense. I love that, because then I can see like how your thought process is going, and I can see how you're starting to go through a problem. And I think the bigger fail is to not ask and then just do something and have me have to like get into someone's spreadsheet later, just to give like a weird example, and find that the math is wrong or that the logic doesn't make sense or whatever. And a lot of times whoever did that knew something wasn't right, but they were afraid to tell me. Well, I'm going to figure it out eventually. Like, it's better if you just come tell me like, what do I do at this point? This is no longer making any sense, or what was the thing. And when you come to somebody too, I think the other thing to realize is if you put yourself in their shoes, like, it's again, like, it's generally pretty flattering to be the one being asked for help. And so like, it is very rarely off-putting to ask someone for help, because they're going to feel good about themselves because you asked. And I think when you think about it in that way, it becomes a less scary thing to do, because it's not about you looking like you don't know. It's about them feeling like they're a good resource and they know things. And, I think that's the thing to keep in mind.
Well, thank you, everybody. I want to keep an eye on the time. This information was super, super valuable. I would love if panelists, if you don't mind sharing your contact information, if you could put it in the chat for the students. Students, if you have a LinkedIn account, now is the time to add these folks to your LinkedIn account. And then for students that attended too, Mia will be following up with the recording when that's available, but also she put in the chat too, there is a quick evaluation feedback form on this event. We're always looking for ways to improve the process and the experience for students. So if you don't mind taking a couple seconds to fill that out. So panelists, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Yes,
Happy to be
Thank
here. Thanks a lot.
see ya.
everyone.
Thank you.